From a network of highly secure, top secret locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider Podcast 2 and 5 edition. Since we spoke to you last, the Spurs have had a breakthrough and then a setback. I'm not sure where we want to start, but I am your host, as always, Mike Finger, joined by Express News Sports editor Nick Talbot, the inimitable Ringo star Tom Orsborn, and the polarizing Jeff McDonald. Do you want to start with the good or the bad Tom Orsborn?
Well, I got to correct you a bit, Mike. Secure locations outside of South Texas.
Oh, that's true. That's true. We've already had our first error. Tom is in Indiana.
Yes, at a secure, undisclosed location.
Okay.
In the Marriott chain.
I was going to say, which Marriott?
Yeah. I mean, last night, I saw it coming. I even, not to toot my horn, but I saw it coming last week with, the way Indiana was playing. They're at home. They're going to be desperate. They needed this. They needed the win last night. What I didn't see coming was I thought the Spurs would have some momentum coming off that Milwaukee win, but they did not. From the beginning, as Pop said, they were following the Bucks around, and his post-game comments were strong, but he held back. It wasn't what he would say in the past. It wasn't as forceful as what he would say in the past, but he got his point across. The biggest disappointment for him was those kind of games happen with the way the schedule falls. Your team's coming off a big win. There's a letdown. The other team's desperate. You're on the road. But, he was surprised that it happened that early in the season, this early in the season. That was the biggest disappointment for him.
How much of it was Indiana just shooting the lights out of that place to start the game and just getting...
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the Spurs played into that. They let Sabonis, they ran that pick and roll. They never, as Jakob Poeltl said, they never had an answer for it. With the outside shooting, that opened up more space. It just kind of played hand in hand. And I agree. The Pacers shot the lights out, but as I said, the Spurs just didn't, they didn't have that energy from the start. They weren't, a lot of those were open looks because they weren't rotating. They weren't getting out on the perimeter. Indiana started hot, but the Spurs played into it with the way they started.
Well, we're recording this on Tuesday for the viewers out there who might be wondering, or listeners, whatever they are. And in the Tuesday edition of the San Antonio Express News, I believe I read something from Ringo about how great the defense has been for this team. And so it's kind of confusing to me to hear about a game on Monday night in which the defense might not have been so impressive. So what is going on with this team
in Indianapolis? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the danger of the world we live in, not to get too inside baseball, but it's kind of how we have to operate. You go in, you've got an angle. They cracked the top 10 in defensive rating coming into this month. They played really well in Milwaukee defensively, and then, it's just a letdown, just one of those things. And
but the defense has not been a fluke up until Monday night. They talked in the preseason about wanting to be more active. I believe if you look at the analytics, the numbers back up that they're playing at a much higher pace than they did last year, and actually in the top half of the league in pace. The defensive numbers, the analytics back up the eye test there. And there was one step back. But when we're talking about, we're doing this podcast once a week, so I know there's a temptation to focus on one bad game. But as a whole, I think things are going pretty much as we sort of expected them to go, right?
I think the defense flopped in Indiana because the young Spurs can both read the future and their own press clippings.
They
got a little too full of themselves, maybe. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. what the identity they've been talking about setting to start the season is the pieces of it are there. You see it, and you maybe don't see it for 48 minutes every night or for, consecutive games in a row, but you can see what they're trying to do, get really disruptive with the defense. When they're at their best, it's like all arms and legs flailing on defense, and it's DeJounte picking off a pass, and Devin Vassell getting his hand in there and knocking one loose, and Derek White driving a charge, and things like that, and that fuels the offense going the other way. When they have to slow down and play in a half court game, which if you want to go back to the Dallas game that has occurred since our last podcast, that's kind of what Dallas did, is keep that thing really slow and make the Spurs execute in a half court, and that's much more difficult for them to do over the course of 4 quarters than it is if they're getting some easy fast break buckets. I mean, I don't know. I haven't checked the numbers today, but at one point they were like top 5 in fast break points per game in the league. And when is the last time we have said that about the San Antonio, by goodness, Spurs? They're never a fast break team, but that's really a part of their identity this year. And you see what they're trying to do. They don't always pull it off. Sometimes they do it well, but don't win the game. We can talk about their fourth quarter fumbles on some of these games if you want, because that's kind of like they do what they need to do for 3.5 quarters, and then you get into a half court game in the fourth, and they have had trouble pulling those out. But the pieces of what they want to be, you can see there.
Yeah, I guess that's a transition we could make. And going back one game from the Indiana debacle was the win of the year, the win of the century, I think Greg Popovich called it, as he walked into his massive post-game press conference where he saw only, quote, the same 2 bozos with the same bozo coach in the post-game media room in Milwaukee. In that game, actually before that game, I had mentioned to the polarizing Jeff McDonald that contest was going to go one of 2 ways. Either your local Cagers were going to just be blown the heck out of the building by the defending champs because they'd been close so many times in a row and hadn't gotten there, or they were going to play a close game that they finally were going to win. And the latter is what happened. And to recap the week, the Lakers game was after our last podcast, right? I think we're looking forward to the Lakers game before the last one. I might be wrong about that.
I think you're correct.
So that game, no. I guess that was the night before our last podcast, but there was another one in between there. Anyway, the Mavericks game, they get out to an 18-1 lead, 25-5 lead, and do not finish that one off. It was continuing a trend of getting out to leads and not being able to finish them off. They finally did it against the Bucks, and they did it in ways. The details were encouraging. Not just the result. You saw DeJounte Murray show off basically every part of his game down the stretch, whether it was a pull-up elbow jumper or a drive to the basket or a three-pointer. You saw Keldon Johnson finally, after missing so many three-pointers this season, and the staff continuing to encourage him to keep shooting them. He hit a key one from the corner. If we would have taped this podcast on Monday morning before the Indiana game, we would have been talking about what a breakthrough this team had made in so many different forms.
Right. It wasn't the win of the century, but it was a win of the season so far because they put a lot of things together and seemed to exercise those fourth quarter demons a little bit. And we don't expect a young team. Like, it's not like, it's like they figured it out against Milwaukee, so they've figured it out now. I mean, there's going to be where they say progress is not a straight line. It's kind of like that with a young basketball team. We're going to see some slippage there, but it was encouraging. Just from the fact of it was getting to the point where it was going to be demoralizing for this young team to get all these games into the fourth quarter and then not be able to pull them out, not be able to pull them out. You get this. It's just human nature, especially with young players that haven't been around the NBA so much, that when you have a stretch of that, you just start, the self-doubt seems to creep in a little bit. So I think for more reasons than no bigger reason than that, for them to be able to pull that out on the road against the defending NBA champions, was a good sign. It was good for the psyche, good for the soul, and all that. I also noticed Milwaukee went in there and lost again the next night at home. So I don't know.
Yeah. Jeff's right. It would have started to get demoralizing, and last night really hurt him. And that's Pop said that he hopes it hurts. And I talked to Jakob, and Derek after the game, and they looked like they were embarrassed, and that's a good sign. I look for a bounce back after what happened, and but it's as Jeff pointed out, it's a roller coaster ride with a young team. It's just going to be like this probably throughout the year.
Well, here's one part of the roller coaster that has been constant throughout this year is, win or lose, whether they blow the game or play well, win the game.
Every day. I know where he's going. It's the morning of games. It's post games. It's pregame. It's win or lose.
I don't want to get our host in trouble here. But go ahead.
And no fit. I'm just saying what Jeff is about to describe is one of the damnedest things I've ever seen in the universe. Go ahead.
Craig Popovich has been a delight
delightful
to deal with. Deal with even is the wrong word. It's like to be around, to ask questions of, to learn basketball from. I mean, you can just ask. It's almost like twice a day on game day, you get a Reddit Ask Me Anything with Greg Popovich, because you can ask him anything.
The listeners of this podcast are assuming that we're being sarcastic because from time to time on this podcast, we have sort of ventured on the tangents of sarcasm. And so there's going to be some hesitancy. I can feel you out there, running your laps, driving in traffic, whatever you do when you listen to the podcast, and you're thinking these bozos are making fun of how mean Greg Popovich has been. They're not sincere. They're poking fun at him. Nothing could be further from the truth. We're not making fun of the man. The man has been a delight every day of this season. They're 2-5, and there has not been a more positive, talkative, just delightful coach in all of professional sports this year than Greg Popovich.
I mean, they basically hired Ted Lasso.
They have hired Ted Lasso. It's been incredible in all seriousness, because people might be tempted to think that I'm poking fun. I think he made a conscious decision. This is speculative on my part, but he knew this was going to be a tough year. He knew it was going to be a rebuilding year. And I think he made a conscious decision just to be positive and to be delightful. I keep using that phrase, but to be cooperative. And I think that maybe he could be, this is crazy. He could be a Spurs Insider podcast listener that after months and months and months of hearing the upbeat sign-offs, he finally bought in.
Let me say this about Pop. I think the general public thinks of him in a certain demeanor. I think the negative ones go viral. The ones where you quote unquote get popped, or like the sideline interviews, they go viral. And those, you don't see the effusive 10-minute answer about what Keldon needs to do here or there. You see, the sarcastic ones, and I like those too. But I think a lot of the viewers who aren't listeners who aren't viewers, think of Pop as just 100% that guy all the time. And that has not been the case for 15
for years. There's always been good Pop, and you'd get great Pop in a pregame in Philadelphia or New York, and you'd get good Pop a couple times a week.
What would happen was you'd get good Pop before the game, and you would say, well, there's good Pop. We're getting bad Pop after the game. And that would happen 99% of the time. There's no bad Pop so far this season. No bad Pop interviews. He's making jokes. He's making jokes off camera. He's poking his head in the media rooms and telling us to go get wine.
He even asked me last night if I was lonesome.
What?
I was touched.
I
was touched because I was the only, me and one of the Spurs staffers were the only people in the press room, so media room. So
yeah,
I was touched.
Again, we're speculating, but I think our host's speculation is probably spot on. Like if
tested this theory out and asked him a question that begins with how much, just to see how he answers it this year versus
okay.
Those are the questions he never wanted to answer because
listen to this.
Well, he even let a happy slip. He even admitted he was happy at one point this season about something the Spurs did. I forget what. But.
Well, Nick Talbot brings up a point. And that is for someone like the polarizing Jeff McDonald, who is in his 15th year as a Spurs beat writer, as a daily chronicler of Greg Popovich. Tom Orsborn and yours truly have been in and around the area even longer than that, not on a daily basis as long as Jeff, but we were around basically for the entirety of the Pop experience. And all of us who have been around Pop for any length of time have been conditioned for certain trigger words, trigger questions that are just not going to work. Like sometimes you can tell within the first 2 seconds of a question how it's going to end. And that person could talk for 20 seconds, like I'm rambling on now. But in the first 2 seconds of the question that some person in Denver or in Memphis begins to ask the question of Pop, it's going to end horribly.
Like number one among those is if you can, and you can sense this coming, is if the purpose of the setup to the question is for the questioner to sort of establish how smart he is in basketball or how much he knows. Right. All those types of things. Yeah. Like he's just going to reject it. It's terrible. You can tell right away. It's almost like a second nature, an instinct now in the back of your head. Without a doubt that Pop's not going to answer this question, that he's just going to swat it back like Dikembe Mutombo.
The questions that begin with how are inevitably followed by, what do I have? A meter? Some kind of meter to gauge this?
What am I the answer man? Yeah, exactly.
And anything, if you get to, if you want to know a little too much about the defense, what's working, what do you want? Me to give you a clinic?
Right. So multiple times this season, we have heard those trigger words. We have heard those questions coming from people. And Jeff and I and Tom have kind of just sat back on our chair and waited.
We lock eyes. We know what's coming.
We know it's just shake our heads and think, this poor son of a gun is just going to get it.
This old hunk of coal.
This old hunk of coal is just he has no idea what he's in for with this answer. And like Pop lets it go. He delightfully answers it.
And it gives like a 5-minute response. That's amazing and informative and like helps you understand the game better. It's amazing.
Yes. What's happening is he's almost letting us get lax in terms of our question asking, because in the past, like let's say you're interviewing Steve Kerr, Frank Vogel. They're so non-threatening that you can get away with asking kind of lazy questions and they're going to help you out. Talk about whatever. They'll happily talk about it. Like you don't have to really hone your mettle of your sharpen your sword of question asking when a guy lets you get away with stuff. With Pop, and way back in the day, I covered a fellow named Bob Knight at Texas Tech and would go to some of his press conferences. And that's the only one I can really compare it to in terms of you had to think in advance of precisely which words you were going to use in your question to these guys, or he could flip it back at you. Like if you made the wrong slip up there, you just wouldn't get the answer that you wanted. So you had to be precise with your language. It made you a better interviewer if you know that your question is going to be flipped back at you if you don't use the right words. For years, like Pop actually, in being bad Pop, made you a better interviewer. Now he's letting people get away with stuff, and it's sort of disappointing.
I think what's happening is the more we talk about it, we're going to ruin it.
Well, you might be right because he does listen to the podcast, clearly.
Yeah, we might ruin it.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you this to kind of spin it forward. What will ruin this? Aside from us talking about it, like when is he finally going to get fed up? It wasn't last night. He was helpful last night after a shellacking, wasn't he, Tom?
Yeah. He had a statement presser, where he wants to make a statement, and then there's no questions coming after that. He's just not going to take them. It's pointless. But yeah, he got his point across. It was good stuff. He was very good before the game.
Yeah. So when does it run out?
When they start winning again.
I think you're right. I think that's the right answer.
Yeah.
And Jeff can speak to this, but for years, when the Spurs were contending for championships, some of the best post-game Pops were after losses, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was almost uncanny. Not always, but the tough losses where he kind of thought the team needed a boost, needed a little, attaboy, he would be good. And then, they go out there and win by 20, and you'd hear about how the pick and roll defense in the third quarter was lax. I remember, one that just sticks out is like Rudy Gay beating Phoenix like at the buzzer on a buzzer beater, and everybody's so happy. And Pop, maybe rightfully so at the time, as bad as Phoenix was just the whole post game was just ranting about how poorly they played to get in the position where Rudy Gay had to bail them out at the end. So it was almost, it was calculated, and it may still be calculated. Like Tom says, when they get on a nice little winning streak, there might be a bring them back to earth kind of thing. If they ever get on that winning streak, that's the thing. If they're going to win, they may never have that winning streak, and we might just get this Pop all year.
Well, Ringo, on the past couple of podcasts has had some pretty prescient analysis about how the upcoming games are going to go. I think might have called.
He's like that chicken that predicts the Super Bowl at Ocarina or whatever that was.
Even a blind hog finds an acorn every now and then, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have hogs.
What I'm asking is, okay, Tom, do you have in your secure location with the concierge lounge and the what have you, do you have access to an upcoming Spurs schedule that you can kind of shed light for the people out there who might be wondering how the next week or so will go?
I think I can find one, Mike. Hang on. Dip into my...
You don't know off the top of your head? I believe they're playing the Mavericks of Dallas on Wednesday.
They're playing the Mavericks, and then they go to Orlando, and then they go to Oklahoma. I can't speak. Orlando, and then Oklahoma City. Those are the next three, I know.
So how's that going to go?
Last week saying they would beat Dallas. I'm going to stick with that. It's their second time around with them. They're at home. They're coming off, an embarrassing loss. So I see them beating Dallas Wednesday night for the second greatest game of the century.
We don't know if Porzingis is playing in that game.
That's true, but with or without him,
it does sound like defensive stalwart Maxi Kleber is not going to play, but they might get Chris.
Then a big revenge game for the Orlando Magic.
Yes, but
how's that going to go?
I'm going to stick with our Spurs, our local Cagers in that one.
Okay,
that's a 2-game winning streak you just predicted.
Yes, and first of the year.
And then the team with the do they have the worst record in the Western Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder?
Yeah, but aren't they kind of like the Spurs? They play hard every night. They're in the game, I think.
So what's going to happen there? They came back and beat the Lakers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a tough one.
You're copping out?
I'm going to stick with the Spurs win there.
3-game winning streak coming up, people.
3-game winning streak.
That'll be the end of Happy Pop.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So at the end of this 3-game winning streak, is it at Oklahoma City, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a Jeff or Tom game?
That is a Jeff game, buddy.
So Jeff, are you prepared for bad pop after that third win in a row for the Spurs?
I'm just going to make a friend of the podcast, Taylor Hare, ask all the questions after that one.
I don't think he's allowed. Speaking of Taylor Hare, Spurs videographer extraordinaire, one of his projects on the most recent road trip was to chronicle the acceptance of a championship ring, a large, gaudy, extravagant championship ring for one of the Spurs Insider podcast's favorite players of the listeners, Bryn Forbes. And who sort of played a key role in the upset, the win of the century later that night in Milwaukee. And don't want to spend too much time on Bryn Forbes, but he's already had quite an up and down start to his return to the Spurs, has he not?
He has. To answer your question, would you like me to expound?
I mean, it seems like that is what one might do on a podcast, but whatever you'd like to do.
First, what's a podcast? Yeah, he was before they rolled into Dallas, really. So really those first 4 games of the season, he wasn't shooting it well, A, and B, he just wasn't playing much. Like he started off the season. I've got the game log up, so I'm doing the addition right now. But he started off the season 6 carry the one. Started off the season 1 of 12 from the floor over the first 4 games, rolling into that game at Dallas. Broke out of it a little bit there, and scored 15 points and made 5 3-pointers, and was kind of a big reason the Spurs had a chance to win that game. Then rolls into Milwaukee, where he was honored before the game and scored 16 more, including some big buckets in the second half. And then even in Indiana, I don't know that he played great, but he made all his shots. He was 3 of 3 from the floor. So, that game before they went on the road trip, he played 3 minutes against the Lakers. He played 3 minutes of overtime game against the Lakers. He missed both shots. He turned the ball over. Pop took him out, never put him back in. Really started to get some run in that Dallas game, and he's producing. This is kind of what this is what you get to live with Bryn Forbes. When he's hitting shots, you keep the minutes coming, and when he's not, maybe you go away from him a little quickly. And I'm not a fan of doing that with a lot of players. Like it's a make or miss league. You can't totally base a player's playing time on whether they make their first couple of shots, because that just ends up messing with their heads. But he's a guy that when he's rolling, he's helping you, and when he's not, it's probably time to let somebody else try to help.
I would posit that is exactly right, and that
what? Hey, Luis, can we play this clip on Twitter later? What did you say again? You posit what now?
I don't remember. I think they're handling Bryn Forbes' minutes exactly the way Bryn Forbes' minutes should be handled. He's a guy, if he's not making shots, he's not really helping you. And that might sound a bit insulting, but I think it's just sort of the way it is. And when you sign him, you expect him to come off the bench and make 3-pointers. As a team that need 3-point shooting. And if he's not doing that, there's no reason to have him out there. And I think that part of the reason why people were upset about the Bryn Forbes experience the first time around was the idea that he was keeping younger guys, other guys that people wanted to see off the floor. And so I would think I'm not monitoring the moods of every Spurs fan out there in the world, but I would find it hard to believe that anybody would have a problem with how he's being treated so far this season. I think exactly what you said. He wasn't helping in those games where he was struggling, so he didn't play. And then when he does help you, it's nice to bring that guy off the bench. And really, the way I think we talked before the season about all the depth that the Spurs had, and they had all these options. At this point, there's really not a whole lot of guys who aren't playing that you figure should be playing. It's almost like they don't have enough at this point. Josh Primo's the exception. We're not going to do another episode on Josh Primo here, but it seems like the minutes are sort of allocating themselves in a way. I don't have any huge qualms with who's being used and who's not being used. Maybe we can get into Thad Young.
That's what I was going to say. I guess you were talking about young players mostly.
As opposed to the young player.
The young player. I'm just curious. It kind of depends on your goals with Thad Young, right? I mean, I think if your goals are just to let young players play, maybe that's what you do. But in the microcosm of trying to win an NBA basketball game, I think that's a guy that if you give him to 10, 12 minutes a night, will do some things for those 10 or 12 minutes that are going to help you win the game. And he wasn't playing like at all until that Milwaukee game. And that's kind of exactly what happened. He played, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but played 10, 12 minutes and kind of back the box score in those minutes. And they were important minutes in that game because Jakob was in foul trouble and you don't want Drew Eubanks like getting all the backup center minutes. So if you're trying to win games, I think maybe giving Thad Young a longer look will be helpful. And also if you're trying to trade Thad Young, giving Thad Young a longer look would be helpful. Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, what one word would you use to describe Thad Young?
He is, let me think. I'm going to think. I'm going to dig deep into my, I would say this is going to be a little out there. It's going to be a little out there. It's going to be a little like people are going to be like, what? That doesn't sound like Thad Young. But what I'm going to say is professional.
There you go.
Ding, 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 ding.
Everyone
that was a joke. Of course he's professional. That's what everyone starts. That's what every time you ask any player or coach, about Thad Young, that's the first sentence that they say.
He's a pro. He's a professional.
I think maybe the question we need to ask is when you think of Thad Young, what is the second thing you think of? And see what those answers are. Because that might be interesting.
Well, it was kind of fascinating to hear Thad Young speak after the Milwaukee game, after he had his game.
Complain about playing time without complaining about playing time.
Right. Look up front. First thing I want to say about Thad Young is he's a pro. Second thing I want to say about Thad Young is in a very professional way. And I mean this sincerely. Like he talked about all the ways he was helping the younger guys, wanted DeJounte to come along, his encouragement to Keldon Johnson, very much an involved teammate on this team.
Despite my unfortunate situation.
But there was all these asides, despite my unfortunate situation, despite I wanted to play more. He made it very clear he wants to play more. Like he's not the happiest pro in the world of pros these days. And really, to his credit, that's to his credit.
Yes,
like
exactly.
He wants to play more. He is sort of unhappy with the role he's given. He thought that when he's on this young team, he's the only veteran. Of course he's going to play. He hasn't been playing that much. But I mean, the teammates like him. He's patting DeJounte and Keldon, all these guys on the back. He seems like a guy you'd want to have on your team for a while.
When you look at him on the bench, he's engaged. He's kind of in timeouts. He's got somebody that he's got players off the side that he's given advice to. I mean, he gave us a pretty inside look at what he told Keldon Johnson in that Milwaukee game when Keldon was 0 for 4 and was starting to pass up 3-pointers about, hey, don't defend yourself.
Right.
Like the one you just took that spooked you was in and out. It was the perfect shot, Keldon. So the next one has to go up. It was the perfect shot. And the third one definitely has to go up. And Keldon made that corner 3. So that's kind of where having that young veteran presence around is helpful for the Spurs. And they're lucky so far that he's been willing to do that. Again, he's not a bad player to play some as well. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that happen a little more.
We're missing when it comes to playing time, we're missing the hot topic of the day.
What's that?
What do you do now with Jock Landale after 26-year-old Australian rookie Jock Landale becomes the first Spur since Jack Haley did it in 1995, and only the third Spur in franchise history to score double figures in 5 minutes or less.
Is it a good thing? Is it a good thing to be on the list as the only since Jack Haley?
That's right. And that, by the way, is courtesy of a friend of the podcast, Spurs PR
Maven
Jordan Hallenstein.
Yes. Airless Jordan, for those of you out there.
Airless Jordan on Twitter, @Airless Jordan.
And while you're on the internet, by the way, like check out Airless Jordan. But then, I mean, and again,
there's other things to do on the internet.
I don't know why I have to bring this up. It's almost insulting to the listeners, because if the listeners are listening to the Spurs Insider podcast, they care about the Spurs, they care about San Antonio, and of course they're already on expressnews.com, and they're definitely already expressnews.com subscribers, and of course they've gotten on the Spurs Nation mailing list. So it's like insulting for me to keep bringing it up. I'm not going to do it this time. I'm not going to mention any of that. Not this time. Anything that I've missed before we wind this down?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we can talk some more about a lot of things, but we also have to do more podcast. We have to do more podcasts later, so we can
Mike, you covered everything from soup to nuts.
I never knew what that meant. What does that phrase mean? Soup to nuts.
I don't know. My colleague Glenn Rogers used to say that all the time.
I don't know the origin of that phrase, because there's a lot of things that are outside of soup to nuts as well. Right. So I don't understand
Jeff doesn't know on this podcast.
Yeah, we forgot.
Reviving it.
We'll bring that back next week and find out if anybody figured out what soup to nuts means. I do think that it would be wise heading into next week to think of Thad Young, because really, and again, there are people out there who think that I'm taking shots when I sincerely compliment someone's attitude. Like, I guess that's just something about me where people think that I'm not giving a full-throated endorsement.
I don't know what that could be or why people.
I know. I don't understand that either. But in all sincerity, again, like, look to Thad Young. This is a guy who knows, in his words, that he's not in a great situation. Like, he keeps talking about his own unfortunate situation. But even if you acknowledge that your situation could be better, that shouldn't stop you from patting people on the back around you. That shouldn't stop you from looking to the man to your left, the woman to your right, thinking, I can help build the potential of these people around me. And that is how I make my mark. It is not up to your coach in life, to your supervisor, to whoever is keeping you down. They do not have power over the contributions that you can make to other people. And so as you venture out into the world before the next Spurs Insider podcast, be Thad Young. Take control of your own situation, as unfortunate as it may be.
Have a purpose. Make the people around you better.
And when you get your chance, don't immediately look for your shot. Make a nifty little pass on a fast break. Create something for other people. And in the meantime, take care of each other and keep it real. We'll see you.